Did you know? Larryboy and the Bad Apple began as a game called Super Mario Bros. 2. Larryboy and the Bad Apple's development company, Slipshod Software, was founded by former Blizzard employees. Larryboy and the Bad Apple ended up similar to what the almost completed Mario 2 played like at the time. They were both 2D platformers with level design that required the player to play in a more strategic way when compared to other 2D platformers of their time, although the two games' mechanics ended up differing greatly. The game's controls were inspired by a game the team worked on together while they were at Blizzard, known as Warcraft 2. Mario Bros. 2 differed from Warcraft 2, however, in that it shared little to no similarities with Warcraft 2 in any way. The core of Mario Bros. 2 lied in the player's ability to pick up and throw enemies at other enemies. When Slipshod Software pitched this element of the game to Miyamoto, he didn't approve of it, saying that this sort of gameplay mechanic is too advanced for modern gamers, especially those fucking whitey gamers in the West who can't be the levels with the real Super Mario Bros. 2. So the idea of throwing enemies was scrapped, in favor of something Miyamoto had suggested to the team, being a vegetable-themed character design. At the time, Mario was falling out of favor, and Nintendo really needed a new IP to try to instill some life into their company. Originally, there was going to be an entirely new world in Larryboy, featuring enemies that weren't vegetables and were rather fruits. There was an argument that broke out between the game developers and the art and modeling crew as a result. "The idea of a fruit in a vegetable-based game is disgusting," the art director mentioned to us in an interview. The development of this fruit-themed level was far along when the art director allegedly went on strike in an effort to assure that the assets for the fruit-themed level weren't completed in time for release. They were so far along in development of this level, in fact, that several fruit-based enemies, one of which was a pumpkin, were programmed and fully functional and still exist in the game's data. This isn't all, there are even unused tile sets for the fruit-based level found in the source code for Larryboy's promotional website. The art director went on to say that these complete assets were scrapped in favor of keeping the vegetable-based theme of the game. This wasn't the only thing to be left out of Larryboy's final build. Yet another asset of the game didn't quite make the cut, which were miniature stopwatches that could be collected to extend the total time of a level. In the game's data, there exists a stopwatch which is animated and spins. However, the game's lead developer, Ivana E. Dix, reported that getting the time to be added to the clock to work was a nearly impossible task from a programming standpoint. Although this idea would later be repurposed as a game mechanic in Nintendo's new Super Mario Bros. U. Fortuitously, there was some content in Larryboy that managed to make it into the final release. Slipshod didn't anticipate this content being in the final build for legal reasons and due to controversy. The now iconic piano stage was nearly cut. Midway through Larryboy's development, the 9/11 terrorist attack on the Twin Towers occurred. This prompted the team to carefully reconsider any suggestible content in the game. A legal advisor rebuked the idea of having piano keys in the game, as they too closely resembled the Twin Towers. It was a tough battle for Larryboy's developers, as the piano stage was highly important to the character arc of Larryboy. In a stroke of genius, just as the last month of development hit, Neville Enon, the game's lead sound director of all things, suggested changing the character playing the piano to be Larryboy, rather than a vegetable-based plane which would be piloted by an internationally known vegetable terrorist. Unfortunately, this meant that Slipshod needed to scrap the character altogether, resulting in the removal of a shorter stage in which the vegetable-based plane crashed into the Pentagon. Oddly enough, a completely original mechanic introduced in Larryboy, in which we'd be stunned after being hit with a ball of watery gunk coming out of a pipe, was very loosely based on a real-life incident that lead developer Ivana Dix had on a trip home from the grocery store during early development of Larryboy. According to an eyewitness's report, a ball of watery gunk had come out of a pipe and hit Mr. Dix on the head, temporarily making him paralyzed before Mr. Dix was taken to the hospital. Funnily enough, if it weren't for Mr. Dix's misfortune, this fresh mechanic would have never made its way into Larryboy, and future games Slipshod would go on to work on. This mechanic found itself in many of Slipshod's games. The mechanic was used so frequently, in fact, that it earned its own name among people who review Slipshod's content, and is simply called the pipe stun. An interesting crossover between Slipshod Software's Larryboy and the Bad Apple for the Game Boy Advance, and the game they developed right after, which was Escape from Bug Island, exists in Escape from Bug Island's third level, where the player can find vegetation, referencing their older game in which every one of the characters was some sort of vegetation. It's also been reported, but not confirmed, that there's an unlockable skin for the main character of Escape from Bug Island, Ray, that resembles Larryboy's signature costume. The voice work for Lazarus Mushroom in Larryboy was done by none other than now famous voice actor Nolan North, best known for his role as a Gorgon guard in the Avengers Assemble TV series. In his later years, Nolan North would go on to credit his voice work as Lazarus Mushroom for being both his most influential role and the crowning achievement in his entire acting career. For some time, audiences speculated that the Game Boy Advance's Larryboy was unbeatable due to a sharp increase in difficulty, featuring hundreds of levels with extremely tight timing that gave no additional lives. Members of the Larryboy community and email list were dead set in expressing that Larryboy's endgame was the only possible task in video game history to that date. The last 100 levels of content in Larryboy were so sharply difficult. The furthest anyone recorded making it was only about 10 levels in. The last 100 levels featured mechanics that weren't seen anywhere else, but also used old mechanics in new and interesting ways, yet annoying ways. Most feared among them being the pipe stun. Nearly 6 years after release, a 30-year-old Polish man by the name of, excuse me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Pozar Domu, who had dedicated his life to completing the game, and had put over 10,000 hours into it, completed the game. At the time, he was surrounded by his 2 toddler boys, 3 infant triplet girls, and his young wife, before the small package of C4 located within the game's cartridge had ignited, killing him and his entire family. His only remaining relative, his 60-year-old father, sued Slipshod. Mr. Domu's father's lawsuit was ineffective, and Sony of Japan countersued for the equivalent of $14 US, just enough to prevent him from affording his heart medication the next day. He died that same day of heart failure. The incident was regarded in the media as the then, according to CNN, crowning moment for the rights of huge companies to murder whoever they desire covertly and ethically. CNN would later go back on their statement in 2010 to give that title to ExxonMobil's CEO for ordering employees to douse a homeless tent camp with gasoline as a message. Roughly translated, this is what the game director for Larryboy had to say regarding the incident. Ha ha, I'm glad those children fucking blew into bits. Ha ha, ha ha ha, burn, 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 burn in hell. If you liked Larryboy, you'll probably like Did You Know Gaming's video on Cooking Mama. Did you know that Cooking Mama took heavy inspiration from Larryboy? And if you liked me, you can check out my content over on Test Star Wars Gamer. I play and review a lot of Star Wars games, and I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I recommend my review of Star Wars KOTOR. It's really well done, and yeah, come check me out.